So today's retirees face three very unique problems that prior generations of retirees really didn't face, and those problems have really only gotten exacerbated as a result of COVID even. So welcome back to Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of life's decisions involving your dollars. My name is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. I'm a certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary. Our team of certified financial fiduciaries at Nelson Financial Planning stands ready this very week to help you change your life with a successful financial plan that provides you with peace of mind for the future. So today's world obviously very different than prior days, and certainly COVID has accelerated a lot of those changes. And if you think of, back in the day where we used to all have 8-tracks and fax machines, although fax machines are still around, but you don't really use fax machines much anymore. Just like you don't use payphones. The more things change, right? In some cases, things have gotten easier, but in some cases, things have gotten more difficult. Certainly the flood of information I think that we get now that we didn't get in prior days can be very confusing. I think the amount of scams that are out there are much more sophisticated than they were in the past. We certainly talked about that on our last program in terms of some of the scams that are out there that folks need to be aware of. They're also similarly for retirement planning and getting income in retirement. I think there are three very unique set of circumstances that retirees face today that weren't really a problem of their predecessors. And in a lot of respects, COVID has accelerated that as well. And so really sort of number one on the list, chief among them, is this notion of low interest rates. And when you think about interest rates control sort of the safe side of the investing world, right? So how much you get on your money market, your CD, your savings account, that's your ultra safe stuff. All of that is determined by what the prevailing climate is for interest rates. Similarly, the bond side of your portfolio, which is the more conservative side, particularly in contrast to stocks, bonds pay interest. That interest, again, determined by the prevailing interest rate environment. So when interest rates are low, that's a situation where you've really got to be thinking about how much ultimately you need to generate the same level of income. So if you think of it in terms of, hey, I need $20,000 of income, right? So $20,000 of income, if it was 30 years ago, you could get 8% in a CD. And if you needed $20,000 of income on an annual basis in retirement, well, then all you would need is $250,000, right? So $250,000, 8%, fantastic. Fast forward to today, and if you're lucky, you can find a 2% CD. And that means that in order to get that same $20,000, you don't need $250,000, you need $1 million. That's 4 times more than what you needed 30 years ago when interest rates were much higher. So the low interest rates really do have a significant impact on the safe side, the conservative side, the bond side of your portfolio. So as a retiree, what can you do about that? And we think that it requires you to really rethink your investment allocation, your asset allocation. The amount that you have in stocks, bonds, and cash can't be the same percentages as what one would typically have used 30 years ago, because two of those three, the bonds and cash side, are at incredibly low numbers that in essence would force you to have to save a whole lot more in order to generate out the same level of income. So our advice is look at that percentage that you've got stocks, bonds, cash, and really look at maybe trying to adjust it in light of the current interest rate environment. And what that means is that you're probably going to have more on the stock side than what you might otherwise have to have had. So if you're having a larger portion on the stock side, you need to be much more selective in terms of what stocks to own. Our general advice on that would be, look, own the stuff that produces the stuff, the products, the services, the goods that the world uses every day. So that's generally name brand, large companies, preferably that pay a dividend. So that's risk number one, that is unique to the current circumstances in terms of where the interest rates are. Number two, and this one kind of cuts both ways, number two is low tax rates. Now, you may think, well, wait a minute, if the tax rates are low, that's fantastic, right? I mean, I'm going to be able to retire, I'm going to pay less in taxes. Well, here's the problem, and here's where COVID has come in to perhaps accelerate that. The risk going forward, we're at tax rates that are at 100-year lows in this country. So the risk going forward is not the taxes are going to stay low and go lower. It's probably the other way. And that's something that COVID has certainly accelerated. If you look at how much the folks in Washington have sort of put into the economy to try and sort of ease things for the American economy, as a result of COVID, you could have the amount of debt that this country owns relative to GDP be upwards of 130 to 140% of GDP. That's never good when you're over 100%. A year ago, that number was about 100%, meaning our debt as a country relative to GDP was about 1 to 1, 100%. We owed as much as our annual GDP. Unfortunately, now we owe about 30 to 40% more than what our annual GDP is. So what's the solution on that? The reality is that the last time you saw the debt getting so much outsized versus the GDP, it was in the immediate aftermath of World War II. What happened then? They raised taxes. Now, obviously, a whole lot of years later, taxes are lower, but the problem when you're at historical lows is that they're probably going up. So low taxes, which may be a good thing, at least at first blush, we think that could potentially be a bad thing and a very unique problem for retirees today that prior generations did not have to deal with. So the bottom line on that is, how do you deal with that? You've got to really be thinking about your assets in terms of their tax nature and really plan out your income in retirement. Really look at, I've got this asset here, that asset there, this asset over here. What's the tax nature of each one of these? It's going to be unique depending upon what it is. And think about your income in terms of where it's going to come from and what the tax implications are. And at the end of the day, you really got to do an actual tax projection on it. Not a back of the envelope kind of thing, but really have an official tax projection run on a tax return in order to really find out exactly where you're going to fall in terms of the tax side of things. So that's number two. Number three is the one that is continuing to compound itself, and that is the longevity risk, right? The risk that we're all living longer based upon advances in medicine and everybody knowing that how to keep better care of themselves, right? Don't smoke and things like exercise and eat better and all of that stuff that we know now that we didn't necessarily know 30, 40 years ago. And of them, longevity is probably one of the sneakier ones that has a significant impact on it because it has the effect of being a multiplier, right? The longer you live, the greater the problem is going to be if interest rates are low. The greater the problem is going to be if taxes go up. Longevity has a multiplier effect that the more you're navigating the proper investment mix and the more years that you have for inflation to eat away and the more years to have to pay for medical expenses, that can significantly have a pretty sizable impact on your retirement. If you think of just medical, it's estimated that 70% of people that are age 65 or older are going to need some long-term care. Look at the cost of an average private room for a year in a long-term care facility, and it's north of $100,000. That's a big aspect of where that longevity risk comes in to play. So bottom line on that, understand that times are unique, and times are particularly unique if you are retiring. You've got incredibly low interest rates, historically low interest rates, historically low tax rates, And you also have a longevity risk as well. So certainly need to make sure that you are saving money more than what you might have in the past, and certainly make sure that you stay invested more on the equity side in order to try and reduce down or increase what your potential return would be over time. Bottom line, as with everything, have to plan ahead and make sure that you are prepared, because it's unique, and it's a unique situation that retirees find themselves in today that's different than prior generations. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we will continue the conversation here on Dollars and Cents on News Radio WFLA Orlando.